So in sort of putting a bow on Khabib Nurmagomedov, and later in the show we will talk to Brian Stan, so we will continue the 223 recap sort of after we make picks on Glendale. But it's very interesting to assess this performance from Khabib Nurmagomedov because he really handled everything beautifully when it came to the rumored 5 different opponents. Dominated this fight. You know, I don't have an argument with a 50-44 or a 50-43. I thought the jab was outstanding, even though at times his team didn't necessarily love what he was able to do with the jab. But you can't take a guy down every single time you try, even if you are this otherworldly talent. And I think all things considered for Khabib, he didn't get the finish, but this was a pretty clean performance. And the notion that a little shine is off of this guy, maybe you're in that camp. I'm certainly not in that camp just yet.
Oh, geez. I mean, there's so much that you said right there.
Let's
go back. Let's go to the fight itself, okay? And again, we'll go back to Joe Rogan and whatever he said. This is a difficult thing, and Joe's been doing this a long time. He's the best, right, at getting people excited for fights and calling fights. He really is. Here's the problem, though. We all become we all do this, okay, myself included. We all do this, is we get a little too excited. And when we're hyping up a fight, we back ourselves up into a corner sometimes by saying this guy is a monster, he's unsurpassed, we haven't seen anything like it. Now we have these impossible expectations on this fighter, right? And now if he isn't that monster, if he isn't that guy that we've never seen before, and we see him take a shot or he doesn't finish one takedown,
right,
it changes the whole narrative now of the fight. Oh, maybe this guy, oh, no, now he's this. Now you have to go the other way. Khabib Nurmagomedov has never been the best striker in the world. And candidly, I don't know if he's ever improved since his first fight necessarily. I think, as far as the striking game. But you know what? He really hasn't had to. He's just gone out there and taken guys down, and he mauls them. Let's go back now to the submission game as far as finishing. He finished Michael Johnson. What are the other finishes that Khabib has had?
No, he has one performance bonus, Kenny, in 10 UFC appearances, and that was in his last fight against Edson Barboza.
Right. So we need to make sure that when we're talking about these fighters, that we don't go overboard too much, because it's not going to, it does a disservice to the fans, but also does a disservice to the fighters themselves.
Right.
And that's what we have to be careful with. Khabib's performance was awesome. He was dominant. I thought that Al Iaquinta did a better job technically of getting back to his feet than Edson Barboza did.
Yes, he did.
Right? So Edson Barboza, again, technically he's the best striker in the game, but he's also a guy who lost to Jamie Varner. Right? So we need to talk about all these things. Otherwise, we're not telling the full story. And I think for Al Iaquinta, this guy is tough as nails. And I thought, given the circumstances, the fact that he went 5 rounds with Khabib, still amazing. However, Khabib isn't known for his finishing ability. He's a guy that breaks people's will. He's a guy that out-wrestles you. He's a guy that puts together nasty ground and pound and gets you out of there mentally. His submission is his pressure. And, again, he'll never be the best striker in the world, but he might not have to be.
Yeah. Right. Now, I am prone to some of that, and I talk to you about this, right?
We all are.
And speaking in absolutes, and I'm certainly, I think, more of a fanatic on this podcast than I am in my day job, which is as a play-by-play announcer for the UFC. But I wanted to bring this up with you. Brendan Schaub, our buddy, tweeted after the fight that Khabib Nurmagomedov would now be the betting underdog against Tony Ferguson and Conor McGregor on the heels of this performance. Now, we have talked about the Conor-Khabib fight. Kenny and I both think it's pretty close on paper. Conor McGregor is the guy that Kenny and I would pick to beat Khabib if we had to choose somebody in this top 10 to beat him. But Khabib Nurmagomedov, Kenny, was a minus 260 favorite against Tony Ferguson, right, who was coming back at plus 200 about 10 days ago when that fight was still on paper. Now, if you want to say it tightens up a little bit because Khabib wasn't able to finish Al Iaquinta as a minus 700 favorite, I'm not going to argue with you. But in my opinion, as I said, there isn't much shine off of this guy. You just set up exactly who he is. I still think he's not all that far removed from the Barboza performance, which to me proved him as the most dominant force in the game. I still think he's favored to beat Tony Ferguson, and I still think when he fights the opponent that he prepares for, he's still the 155-pounder that nobody in this top 15 wants to see on the other side of the bracket.
Yeah, and not only that, we're assuming he's going to fight that same way that he did against Al Iaquinta against someone else.
Great point.
You know what I mean? Like, styles make fights, so we can't say, oh, because he did this, that means he's going to try to stand up with Conor McGregor and utilize that jab.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Right.
So, again, Khabib felt so comfortable in there against Al Iaquinta that he said, you know what, I feel comfortable of striking with this guy. I don't think he's a threat. I felt his power. He's not knocking me out. I've been in there with, he's wrestling 170-pounders, 185-pounders at AKA. He's sparring these guys repeatedly. He knows what power is. He knows what strength is. He knows how to measure his risk and reward in a fight. He's been doing this a very long time. He's 25-0. You know what I mean? So, again, for Khabib, now let's talk about his jab. Let's break it down on a technical level. His jab was awesome. The jab wasn't the problem. It's what he was doing after the jab. That right hand was completely down. And after he was jabbing, he was dropping his hands. I think what he was doing, he wanted Al to come forward so he could hit the takedown. So, again, this is Khabib Nurmagomedov. He knows exactly what he's doing. Does he have the best striking in the world? No, he doesn't. That's never been his strength, but he really hasn't needed it.
Right. He's never been knocked down in 26 pro fights, and so I know defensively, certainly there are things that a lot of people believe he can shore up and even just as simple as maybe raising his guard more consistently. But perhaps that's a byproduct of never having been knocked down. And once that happens, maybe he'll make some changes. But I thought you hit on a very important thing in terms of the evolution of an elite fighter, because you talk to any chief corner type about any elite fighter, and it's about sending a different fighter out every time. It's not about sending the same guy out there. Khabib's going southpaw in training right now. Javier Mendez is looking at him like, what are you doing, man? It is a constant evolution, and hopefully Khabib can just stay active. He has mastered this weight cut now, and that is a very good thing. So hopefully we get Khabib at least once more here in 2018. We'll circle back more to him later, Kenny, but I want to segue to Rose Namajunas and Joanna Jędrzejczyk.
Wow.
And I would think that this would be even more satisfying a win for Rose. In fact, I know it is because I was texting with Pat Barry last night. This is an amazing result that she would be able to beat Joanna Jędrzejczyk in a kickboxing match like this. And forget about the numbers and what they say, right? This was a clear 3-2 in my mind for Rose Namajunas. And I just have so much respect for this 25-year-old and the way she carries herself and the way, despite being admittedly as emotional as it gets, she can still succeed in the toughest sport in the world, man. A lot of respect for Joanna in defeat, certainly, but Thug Rose Namajunas does it again, my man.
One of my favorite fights of the year. This was a very technical fight. For Joanna, you could see she was very, very nervous. She typically is kind of a slow starter, in my opinion. But she seemed way too jittery. Rose seemed very calm and composed. But more than anything else, John, I think the big difference between these two women, Joanna was fighting, and Rose had a plan. She kept going to the same combinations. Why? Because she knew that Joanna was exposed with that left hook. Yeah. She knew she could land that repeatedly. She just needed to disguise it with other things, then go back to the combination, then go back to that combination, pressure her, look for a takedown late in the fight. This was strategy against someone who's fighting. Joanna was just fighting. Why she didn't go repeatedly back to that outside leg kick, I don't know. If she was able to do that, she would have not only taken away that left hook, she would have slowed Rose Namajunas down. She would have been able to back her up and then take advantage of the fight. I had the first 2 rounds for Rose Namajunas. I had the next 2 rounds for Joanna Jędrzejczyk. That fight was coming down to that last and final 5th round.
Yep.
And it was Rose. It was Rose who was able to back her up, ignoring the pain I'm sure that she was feeling a little bit in that lead leg. Joanna was not attacking it, so she was free to come forward, keep continuing to land some nice combinations on the inside on Joanna. it was interesting because if you look at both these women, you look at both their backgrounds, you'd think that Ioana would be able to punch a lot harder. The difference was the boxing skills of Rose. She was landing some heavy shots. She was backing up Ioana. She got her respect for their power early, reminding her of that knockout back in New York the first time around. And hitting that takedown in the 5th round was just a thing of beauty. This was just a perfect game plan from Rose Namajunas and her team.
And when you talk about clutch performances, sometimes in MMA you don't look at that 5th round and say, man, was that clutch, right?
Amazing.
But think about a 2-2 fight, and the most dominant round of the fight was Rose in round 5, leaving no doubt in anyone's minds that she had won that fight. Of course, on the judges' scorecards, I don't think she actually needed it because it was 49-46 across the board, but she certainly fought that last round as if she needed it. Now, in terms of Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and I got to say, too, Trevor Whitman's a damn genius. I know you have to have the athlete who can go in there and execute the game plan, but that guy is next level in terms of what he has done and with Rose at 25. But for Joanna, Kenny, I know she went to the leg kick, and we've seen some evolution, but largely there hasn't been much evolution inside the octagon. She's doing everything in training. She's offensive wrestling in training. She's defensive wrestling. She's grappling. When she's in MMA, Kenny, she's doing one thing, and the opposition – you know, they don't have that many things to prepare for.
Again, I don't know the circumstances around her training camp. I do have a friend who is there at ATT and a very well-known guy. But, you know, he's not sure that they have the best game planning going on over there right now. This is what I'm hearing. I don't know if that's the case. But watching the fight, that may be true. And she has awesome coaches around her. I think she's being trained very well. How good of a game plan, how well they're preparing for Rose Namajunas, though, I don't know. You know, I would imagine that Joanna is getting better as a fighter and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you do have to have these game plans. And sometimes they get specific depending on the fighter. Sometimes they don't. What did they do to expose Rose? I don't know. It didn't seem like Joanna had a very specific game plan on what she wanted to do, what specific combinations. She was just throwing a bunch of stuff, which is great. She's good enough to maybe pull it off, but not against Rose Namajunas.